Hello and welcome. I'm the Rambling Director, and today we're talking about the first half of Season 1 of the new live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender. I really like the original Avatar, the animated series, and in fact it's one of my favorite shows. I've talked about it a few other times on my series, and I just wanted to give this a real fair shake. And going into it, I knew that was going to be very hard to do because this is one of those shows that seems geared to piss off everybody. Um, I've seen a lot of fans of the original who just won't watch it no matter what because the movie that Shyamalan made, which I don't think it's entirely fair to blame him with the failure of that movie, but he made a movie of Avatar in the early 2000s, and it was terrible. Iconic. It's one of like the worst movies of all time, apparently. I've actually never watched it because I like myself too much to watch it. So anyway, they, you have those people. Then on the other hand, you have people who I think are more like-minded to me and were just willing to give it a shot. I like a lot of anime and Japanese media, so I'm actually very used to this. This is a pretty common thing with anime where you might adapt a manga into an anime, and then you'll take a live action series approach, and typically the live action series changes a lot. So I'm gonna give you the perfect example before we talk about Avatar, because this is what I felt like the Netflix series really was. If you've ever watched the show Death Note or read the manga, you know that the manga and the anime are very, very close. They're very similar. There's some changes, but for the most part, it's a very accurate adaptation. Then if you watch the live-action Japanese series of Death Note, you know that a lot of things were changed, particularly with the character of Nier. Then if you watch the two movies of Death Note, again the Asian films, not the Netflix movie with Nat Wolff. If you watch the Japanese movies of Death Note, they're live action. They are fantastic. They are nothing like the manga. They are, in so many ways, they change so much that it's almost unrecognizable in some moments. But what is very good about it is it takes the key moments of the story and finds a good way to condense it down into, kind of distill it into its main elements. The ending of that film series is radically different, with L actually being alive at the end, whereas in the series and in the manga, L dies. So it's a big change, right? It's a lot of big changes, but yet it sticks very close to the spirit of the manga. And ironically, I think it is one of the best movie adaptations of a manga or even of a comic in general. That's what this first half, again, 4 out of 8 episodes is what we're reviewing today. That's what this reminded me of. It takes the core elements of the first half of season 1 and distills them into 4 shorter, more succinct stories. But what I thought was just fantastic about that is that they're able to work in other things that would have been missed if they hadn't adapted it the way they had. Let me explain. The tunnel of the two lovers. That's a story I thought would be completely nixed out of it, as well as the minstrels. But they find a way to work them into the story in a way that has nothing to do with how it was originally represented in the animated show. Aang and Katara, they never have their romantic moment, their little kiss in the tunnel, and the love lights the way for them and all that. None of that happens. Instead, they take the concept and do something radically different with it, but at the same time, it actually really works because of the way they worked it into the story. It feels like the B plot that should be there. It doesn't feel like fan service, although things like the minstrel sing "Secret Tunnel" that was pretty fan servicey. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of that sort of thing. In Omashu, you still have the guy who yells "My cabbages." That was great. I was really excited to see him. And, you know, it's dramatic. It's really in-your-face fan service, but it's a very short moment, and it's actually surprisingly done so well that it did make me like cackle, laugh, like it was really good. So in terms of the story, how they pace it and put it together, I was particularly impressed with the way that they spend kind of an even amount of time, more so than in the show, where sometimes it feels like we have a 22-minute time slot and we got to just pop it along and rush through all of this stuff. So things like the Kyoshi Warriors taking more time, they change a lot of stuff. Like, for instance, Aang bringing joy to the town is not quite as over the top as it is in the animated show. Nonetheless, I liked the reinterpretation of that, particularly when it came to Sokka and Suki. I thought that was a really nicely done relationship with a lot of bizarre sexual tension in it, which I guess you can do more of in a show like this, which is made for older people, whereas the original Avatar is much more for kids. So I liked that. Now, I want to talk a little bit. We'll come back to the structure of the show because I want to praise that a little bit more, especially where Zuko was involved. I thought that was probably the best part of it. Is Zuko is such a... The guy who plays him, he even kind of sounds like Zuko. And the characterization with him and Uncle Iroh is... I like Uncle Iroh. There's a few moments where he borders on Flanderization, but when he comes back from it, it's really good. So he maybe talks a little too much about his jasmine tea in this, but then when it gets to the stuff about his son and the relationship between him and Zuko and how that actually functions within the show, I thought there was some really good writing there. And in particular, the moments where we see them have sort of a pseudo father-son bond. I know you're not supposed to say this, but in some ways it really actually did work better than the animated series. And I think that's because with these episodes being an hour long each, or 50 minutes or so, you can condense a lot more of that into single episodes. And so it seems like more is happening because it's happening over a shorter amount of time. Does that make any sense? I hope it does. So when watching it, it really struck me, the relationship between these two, how genuine it came across, as genuine as in the show. The stuff with Katara and Aang, not so much, but that's because they're having to cut out a lot of the filler of the original show. And as much as I love the original show, there is a lot of filler. It's a traveling show. They're going from place to place. And so there's a lot of meeting people and doing things that really isn't necessary to the plot, but it's where a lot of the character development happens. And I guess when you're adapting something and you have to shorten it exponentially, that's just the trade-off you're going to have to make. And I really thought they handled it well for the most part. And the romance between Aang and Katara really gets started in the next season more so. So that's fine. And again, I'm only talking about the first half of this season. The CGI on Momo, good. There's some moments where it's really good. The CGI on the backgrounds, on the city, I gotta give it some slack. These are some massive worlds to create. And it's not like they were working on a $70 million budget, like a movie. I would imagine this was probably a similar budget to a series of unfortunate events. And with that being the case, it's really, admirable that they did as good as they did. So I gotta cut them some slack, but there are some moments where it almost makes you wonder, like, wow, if we're just gonna animate this again in CGI, why did we even make it live action, Because there's some moments where everything is so obviously animated that it does take you out, including some moments where the people are doing stuff and clearly CGI puppets have taken over for the humans. And again, for the effort and for the money that they had to work with, it's impressive that they got this much on screen. on the other hand, it does have its moments that are not so great. Let me talk a little bit about what I think the reaction of other people is probably going to be like to this. Before the show started, I saw, again, I said this is almost designed to piss both sides off. And I mean that politically as well, because you're going to have SJWs that I saw complaining that Sokka and Katara were Inuit people, Eskimos, the people that anyone who's ever watched the animated show would tell you that's what they are. I mean, which is funny because, 5 days out of the week, SJWs hate Asians. So, but anyway, I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds of that. Let me hate the other side for a moment to be equal-handed. Then you have the right-wingers that I saw. None of them watched this show. When they said this, they weren't even going off of trailers, I don't think. They wanted to believe this was going to be woke. And so they were saying, Katara is a girl boss in this one, which if you don't know, a girl boss is like a woman whose success is kind of predicated on the failure of a man, or a woman who is kind of like, sort of like almost a Mary Sue, like who's very, kind of perfect, achieves everything, very successful over a man, takes charge from the men. It convinces me they never watched the animated show, because Katara is such a feminist, girl bossy character in the original that watching this, I actually was surprised how non-woke it all was, because Katara actually doesn't constantly call Sokka a chauvinist, sexist. She isn't constantly bossing the guys around. In fact, I find her to be kind of a more relatable character in season 1 anyway, than Katara is in the animated show, because in season 1 of the animated show, there are times when Katara is just insufferable. And I know that people probably will get mad for me saying that, but it's the truth. There are times when she is I know woke was not a thing back then, but it's that same sort of mentality as when you meet these people on the internet who are like, everything's about mo rights, mo civil rights, just everything is like a crisis to them. That's what Katara was like in first half anyway of season 1, and even in the second half of season 1, there's some moments where it's just it's all about her empowerment, and Katara in this is way better when she is talking to the guys. It's always are upset with them, about Jet, for instance. It's a lot more believable because it's a lot more about we have these different points of view and we're just going to argue about them like normal people. Whereas in the animated show, there was always this subtle hint of Katara thought everybody was sexist. And it's the thing I didn't like about Katara the most. So when I see right-wingers who complain about, Katara's going to be a feminist in this, she was a feminist in the animated show. Watch it before you start expressing and opining opinions on it. Watch the original show, because honestly, she's not that bad in this by comparison. So it's honestly one of the moments that I think they improved on in this live action show, is that Katara is not constantly thinking everybody is a sexist, which it just gets old in the animated show. Whereas in this, again, at the very least, she just talks more like a normal person. When they're arguing or fighting, she's like, you don't take me seriously because I'm your little sister. It's not, you don't take me seriously because I'm a woman. I'm going to cancel you on Twitter. Which, if this video gets any traction, I'm going to make so many people mad by what I just said. But that's how Katara is in the original show. Okay? I really genuinely liked that better about her in this. The trade-off is in the animated show, she is a much more active, defined character, whereas in this, she is a lot blander. I don't find any of her lines or any of her actions are really going to stick with me the way that Katara in the animated show did. Aang. Let's talk about Aang for a minute, because I gotta praise this kid. This kid is amazing. I actually, when I was watching it, I was watching it with my mom because I showed her the original show and she's a big fan of it. And I turned to her and I was like, you know what? This kid is like an Asian Haley Joel Osment. And Even the way he talks, even the way he emotes is really similar to Haley Joel Osment. I liked this kid a lot. I thought he was really fantastically cast as Aang. He really gets a lot of that fun, the cheekiness, the kind of like smirking like narcissism that Aang shows from time to time, but also the humility and the loving kindness of Aang. Another one that I thought was great was Sokka. I don't know where they found this guy, but he looks just like Sokka. And you know what? He sounds a lot like him. And even his delivery of certain lines is very similar. Like there's a moment where Aang, bangs into a statue, and Sokka goes, "There he goes, savior of the world." Chomp. That was Sokka right out of the cartoons. And again, he looks like if that character was just put into an AI and humanized. It looks just like him. Overall, the direction is good. The editing wants some. It's lacking a little in the editing, especially in the action, where I want to see a lot of this. And when it's in slow-mo, you can see a lot of it. But when it's in regular speed, it is so choppy and shaky, I can't see what's going on sometimes. That was a real shame. I would have liked this to have been directed more something like V for Vendetta, where I could really see the action even when it's quick. So that was a problem. The direction on the whole, very good. There were some moments in the Kyoshi Island episode that not so much. I thought their direction was a little ropey, but overall, not bad. And in terms of this first half, almost forgot, I love Boomy. Boomy was represented very well. I thought that in terms of just expressing the spirit of the animated show, while not changing too much, but changing enough to make it work in 8 episodes, or 4 episodes in this case. Overall, I'm very pleased with the adaptation. And if you're going to compare it to the Shyamalan movie, I mean, again, I've not seen it, but like I've seen enough people talk about it on YouTube to know that there's no comparison. And for something that is doing, like I said, that sort of Death Note movie style, not the Netflix Death Note movie, that sucked, but the Death Note Japanese movie style of condensing and taking moments that kind of get across the spirit of it without needing to give you every detail, I thought this was exceptionally well adapted. A lot was cut out, but it doesn't feel like as much was cut out as was, because they're giving you all of the key important moments. The things that stuck with you from watching the show are here for the most part. And that, I think, is truly commendable. Clearly, the people who made this had a love for the original source material. Do they represent it all perfectly? No. Do they get it all right? No, absolutely not. But if you come into this expecting it to be as good as the original, I don't know what to say to you. And if you came into it and watched it because you expected to hate it, and you're just going to waste 8 hours of your life on something you expect to hate, then I doubly don't know what to say to you. That's like psychopathic behavior. So get help. For the rest of us who just came into this, accepting it, sorry, I hit the microphone, accepting it for what it is and for what we kind of expected it to be, I don't think you'd be disappointed. It in no way ruins the animated show. The animated show will always be there. You can't damage it. Try as Legends of Korra might, you cannot damage it. It will only get better because it is a timeless show. As a reinterpretation, though, for the first 4 episodes, the first half of season 1, I quite liked it. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thank you, everybody, for watching. God bless you, and I will see you in the next one.